So when you
Mm,
start reading about Karen, like in your head, you're picturing somebody that wants to sabotage you until you really get to know her story. And,
mm,
she made a pathway for you and other women, right? And there
yeah.
are women that have come before us that have suffered worse than us in this male dominated world because they really didn't have anybody to turn to.
Let me tell you about Karen. So it requires me to go backwards in time. As I mentioned, my father was a police officer. And so I was a little kid in, the 80s and late 70s. And there was this female police officer that came on with my dad in like 1972, 73, which is the year I was born. And I would see her, driving around our city, and I would say to my dad, like, "Who's that lady police officer?" And he's like, "That's Karen." And I was enamored by her. She had just as much influence on me, even though I didn't know her very well, but I just saw her, and that's where that visibility matters, right? So I would
Mm.
see her driving around. I'd be like, "Daddy, there she is again." And then fast forward to, I get hired at the police department as a cadet. And then, lo and behold, I get sworn in at the tender age of 21, and I get back from the academy and I get my field training list. And they are three field training officers, and one of them is her. And I was over the moon. I thought, oh my gosh, I get to ride with the person. I get to learn from the person that from when I was a little girl that I have looked up to. And I got in that car with her, and she did not speak to me. I was like, okay. So I thought, well, maybe week one, because this was now my second month. And first month, I was with my male FTO, and he was so chatty. He took me home to dinner, and we would, hang out with his wife. And he was just so personable and, training me at the same time. She did not speak to me, unless it was, hey, here's this general order, here's this, and unless she was teaching me, but we had no conversation. So the first week I thought, okay, well, maybe she's just all business, and that, I've got to earn it. And so I kept doing great. And every morning we were on day shift, and every morning she would drive to her house. We had a little break, and she would tell me to study my map book, stay in the car, study your map book, or write a report. And she would go in and stop in her house, and she would get coffee, and she would come back out with coffee. And I was like, oh my God, like I wanted nothing more than a cup of coffee. But I was like, okay, no problem. So now week two, same thing. I thought, okay, she'll ease up a little bit. I'm still doing good. And week two, she still didn't speak to me. We go to her house and she leaves me in the car. She doesn't speak to me at all. And then I noticed that she was so nice to the other officers and the male officers. And I was like, okay, it's me. So on the last day of week three, my numbers were great across the board. And she left me in the car again, and she got back in. And I did what no recruit should do. And I completely blew up on her. And I just said, what did I do to you? Like, why don't you speak to me? Obviously, you hate me. Can you just tell me what I've done wrong so I can apologize to you? And she looked at me and she said, drive. And I'm like, okay. And so I drove, and she's like, go up there. And so we sat in this elevated place in our city. And she said, I'm going to tell you a story. And I said, I'm listening, because I'm just pissed. And she said, I started here in, let's say, 1973. And she said, I went to the academy. And she said, all of the men at the academy would sit together, and I sat by myself at a really, really long table. And she said, no one spoke to me, and I was ostracized. I was ridiculed. And I got back from the academy, and I was on patrol, and the male officers would stick sanitary napkins to my squad car, and they wouldn't back me up. And she said, and then fast forward to 1991, you walked in this police department. Shows you're bubbly, and you didn't have any problem. And she said, and I resented you. And she said, and I didn't even realize what I was doing. And she was in tears when she was telling me the story of what happened to her. And I love that. It's not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you, right? There's the thing behind the thing. I always say that. What's the thing behind the thing? And I was in tears listening to this. Here's what she didn't realize and what I was able to tell her in that moment. I said, I don't even think you can see or understand the way I see you. I said, I wish you could see yourself through my eyes, because you're the reason, one of the reasons aside from my dad, that I wanted to become a police officer, because I saw you doing it. And I said, I was so excited when you were my field training officer. And I said, you went to uncharted territory. You had to basically hack your way to pave this path. And you did it for me. I said, the reason that I got to walk in here in 1991 and I didn't have to hack that path is because you'd already done it for me. And I got to walk a smoother path because of you.